to the Basalt Regional Library. Welcome. It's the second annual Legends of the Library event. Now, we'd love to be doing this in person, but this year it's just going to be a little different. So grab a glass of wine, sit back in your home, some cheese, and let's just learn a little bit about Basalt's history tonight. We're so excited to tell you about the new Heritage Collection that's under development here at the library. Now, the new collection is the work of the library's Heritage Council. Pauline Bowles, Janice Durox, Bill Hegberg, and Henry Lee. With their guidance, the library has undertaken a review of all of our Basalt histories, guidebooks, resources, and memoirs to determine what will be included in this special collection that you will definitely want to check out. Now, the library is also grateful to Pat Thrasher of the Glenwood Railroad Museum for some of the library's railroad artifacts, including the Hagerman Pass print that's now in the library. Check it out, it's pretty cool. And to Doug McDonald for lending the library the Model G train, which is above the fireplace, also very cool. Tonight, we celebrate our town of Basalt, and the stories that make it special, the many stories that make the town of Basalt special. The Basalt Regional Library is thrilled to be building the Heritage Collection with the help of the community. Here to welcome you to the library are the board president, Enid Ritchie, and assistant director, Berenice Forrest.
Good evening and welcome to all who are attending the second annual Legends of the Library. Tonight, I still see and hear the lively buzz of last year. This room was filled with animated community members laughing, talking, and hugging with their friends and neighbors, all surrounded by the library collection. During this difficult time, the library staff has worked hard to serve you, the community, with your needs, whether for education, business, or pure pleasure. The services, needless to say, have changed in order to keep you and themselves safe from COVID. Our work on the board includes implementing the 3-year strategic plan, which we developed 2019 through conversations and meetings with you, the community. Your input at these meetings and through surveys developed into the following goals. Number 1, improve awareness of the library's resources and programs. Number 2, solve key barriers to access. Number 3, serve a broader community. Number 4, expand connections and partnerships with Valley organizations. And finally, number 5, meet the need for additional resources and ensure financial sustainability. At this time, the Strategic Planning Committee is collecting data to measure growth in these 5 areas. Of course, the pandemic has affected these plans, yet it appears that progress in these areas has occurred. A completed report will be available sometime within the upcoming months. It will be published and available on our website. Volunteering at the library is an excellent way to support library goals and activities. There are a myriad of opportunities, including board committees, special projects, assisting library staff, working with the Friends Bookstore, and working with the Library Foundation. Please contact the library if you are interested in volunteering. Thank you once again for attending, and know that a donation, small or large, will assist us in making our goals happen. And the hope is that later in 2021, we will all be allowed to be in our library building to attend programs, work, browse, or just look out of the windows at the beautiful scenery. Thank you. And now Berenice is going to talk to you about some of our programs.
Thank you, Amy. And thank you for joining us tonight. Despite the library being closed, the library staff has been very busy behind the scenes. Throughout the pandemic, we have offered curbside pickup, and currently we are offering browsing of new items, concierge service, and computer usage in our lobby. We've continued to offer great programming. Some of our programs included the music series with Grassroots, weekly grab and go crafts, our 4th annual tea party, virtual nights, and much more. We added online resources such as Creative Book, and we will continue to add online resources as our community needs them. We are currently planning our music concert series and our summer reading program, and we hope we can see you here then. Please visit our website for upcoming events and resources, and we hope you enjoy tonight's program.
Bill Hedberg recently sat down with local historian Earl Elmont and recorded some of Mr. Elmont's stories of growing up right here.
Hi, I'm Bill Hedberg, and this is an interview for the Legends of Basalt program sponsored by the Basalt Regional Library. Our guest today is Earl Elmont, author of probably the best book on basalt history, Basalt in the Frying Pan, which is available on Amazon. A little free plug, Earl. He also published Basalt Friendly Town as well, and has collected other stories of the valley, including Woody Creek and the Italians, which is a history of the Ioston families who came with the mining and stayed for the ranching. These writings can all be viewed at the Basalt Library if you want to see those, or you can buy one on Amazon. Earl was born in Basalt in 1938. He graduated from Basalt High School with 12 people in his class and went on to multiple education degrees.
All 12 grades.
He became a teacher. He traveled the world. He speaks 4 languages. Today, he lives in central Utah with his wife, Claire. And we're very happy he was able to help with the community.
Yeah.
So welcome, Earl, to the Legends of Basalt interview. We really appreciate you participating.
It's my pleasure.
What inspired you to write the books about basalt?
How many did I write?
No, what inspired you to write them?
Not wanting those stories to die, wanting modern children today or anyone who frequents a library know what happened from 1938 on.
There were a lot of great characters that you refer to in your various writings. Of all those people you talked about in Basalt, who sort of stood out for you the most? What are a couple of the people that really stuck out in your mind, and why?
Yes, several. First of all, the Luxinger brothers. We used to swim and boat in Lake Christine, just out of Basalt. And she was the matriarch of that clan. And there were still some Luxingers around when I was in high school. And one of the Luxinger wives taught school at Basalt, Margaret Luxinger. And I went to school with her children, Mary Ellen and Billy. So I would say the Luxingers. Then the Arbeneys. Emery Arbeny was possibly the most prominent rancher right in actual Basalt. His property was around the coke ovens, and Arbeny Park is named today for him. And it was his barn that Janice Durox had restored. Emery Arbeny had the first tractor in the entire Basalt area. He even beat his fellow Arbeneys like Alex Sr., Furman Arbeny, Laurent Arbeny. He beat all of them. And so he had his son, Buster Arbeny, take it out for a spin. And Buster was young enough and agile enough that he knew how to operate a tractor. Then he gave my brother Fred a try. My father was so poor that he couldn't keep all of my older siblings. So Fred went to live with the Arbeneys at age 11. So he and Bus grew up as brothers. So Fred took it for a spin and it worked. Then Emery said with his Italian accent, I want to take it for a spin. He had a bad leg to start with, an injured leg. He got on, ran around the field 2 or 3 times, pulled into the yard where there was the main water pump and the entrance to the barn and the gate to the house. And he was yelling, "Whoa, whoa," thinking it was a horse, and it wouldn't stop. And his daughter-in-law, who was Bus Arbony's wife, her name was Josephine, she said he knocked out the water pump and water was flying everywhere. And it was that wonderful Josephine that donated
I'm making for June Humphrey. Oh my gosh.
Pool that sits adjacent to the only big swimming pool in all of Basalt. She donated all that land. She figured if I am kind, kids will be kind to me. And they never, ever once bothered her. So the Arbonese were another big one.
So let's go back to you in your childhood. Let's start with your mom. Your mom was living in Basalt when you were born. Where did she and your dad come from?
My dad came from Franklin, Pennsylvania, and the family was German. He didn't speak a word of English till he went to first grade in Franklin. And his dad was pure French. My mother was born in Thomasville, about a mile on the Basalt side of Thomasville, on a riverbank. Across the river, they had their own bridge. And there's a creek to this day named after my grandfather. It's called Jakeman Creek. The only place you'll see a sign about it is if you're up in the mountains, up by whatever those big flat fields are called up there on the way to Eagle, it'll say Jakeman Creek. But down on the Frying Pan Highway, the trees and brush are so thick, you can't even see the creek. But there's one there, and it's named for my grandfather. He was
Your mom, your mother was, when was she born? What year?
born on the 12th of November of 1997. Her sister Maud, who became Basalt's postmaster for 26 years, was born in 97, and or 99, and her only little brother, Fred Jakeman Jr., was born in 1900. So when Maud died in Carbondale at almost 102, she boasted, "I'm the only person I know that lived in 3 centuries." Because she died in the 2020s, 2010s actually, lived all through the 1900s and born in 1897. So she was very proud of that.
That's great. So your grandfather is the person that came to the Frying Pan Valley, your grandfather and grandmother.
He
Did
came,
they come for the railroads?
yeah, he came from Iowa, and he built that home on the Frying Pan, and he ran for justice of the peace for the entire valley. And when he won, it made another man very jealous. So the man came to the bridge and asked to talk with him. While they were talking, the man shot him. They put him on the Midland train and tried to rush him to Aspen, but he died somewhere between Basalt and Jerbozdale. So that left my mom a widow with 3 little babies. And she never did remarry, but Aunt Maud, when her husband died in 1946 in Basalt, he was my father's brother. She decided not to go on county welfare like my mother did. She got a job, and as I said, was the postmaster for 26 years. in one of her nice new post offices she left for lunch. It sat right next to the Bank of Basalt or Alpine Bank, and adjacent to a gas station that's still there. I think there may be some old mining cart sitting on the property now. She decided to go for lunch. While she was out, a gas leak blew the entire roof off that post office and set it down 1 foot crooked. And had she been in there, she would have died. So she probably moved to at least 4 different postal locations during her 26 years.
Boy, the town has evolved from those earlier days, experiencing the ups and downs of economic growth, the ups and downs of opportunity. Now, throughout the years, former Basalt Regional Library Director Barb Milner guided the library from the old Lions Park building to the current Midland Avenue location. Barb is the original force behind collecting many of the books and materials that now form the Heritage Collection. Joining us now are Barb and Basalt Mayor Bill Kane.
Good to go. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. I hope everyone had the same kind of response to those wonderful photographs that Bill and Earl put together. That was a whale of a show. And, I think it reminds us what a wonderful opportunity and yet at the same time a responsibility that we all have to honor our past and not forget the incredible efforts that came before us that made our living here possible. On a personal note, we are honored to actually live in the Arbany House, one of the houses that was built in 1952 over on just by the kilns. So we have enormous respect and appreciation for all that happened. With that, I'm going to say a few words in a minute about events in town and what we can look forward to perhaps in the next years, things that are teed up and some of the changes that we will see occur. But I wanted to get Barb involved in the conversation and talk to us about this incredible collection that she started here at the library. Maybe Barb, you can talk a little bit about your thoughts and what you were striving to accomplish with pulling all these wonderful artifacts together.
Thanks, Bill. We do have a wonderful collection in Basalt of local history, and that was a good example that we just saw of photographs, many of which the Basalt Regional Library has archived over the years. That collection existed when Gene Winkler was the librarian, and I started working, I think, in 1988. So this is an ongoing heritage collection, and I'm pleased to see this evening and listen to Mr. Elmont talk about his experiences.
Yeah, it's great, really great stuff. So Basalt, I guess perhaps as a mini sort of State of the Union here, I think what I can say is despite an incredibly challenging year with economic headwinds and challenges from COVID and real limitations on our ability to meet and assemble, the State of the Union for Basalt is actually very strong. We have a very strong fiscal position. We have a number of really important projects, but I wanted to highlight a vision for downtown, which is, I think we're going to see in the next couple of years. We'll see this vision sort of unfold before our eyes. One is that the council has authorized the study of a urban design plan that would address sidewalks and street furniture and lighting and landscape and all those things that will make downtown, will continue to make downtown an attractive urban center. As you know, we also have recently closed on the final piece of open space land along the river, and we will undertake an advanced shell and a number of park improvements that will make that land a lot more enjoyable and accessible for the public. We're hopeful that we're going to see in coming months a proposal for the redevelopment of the grocery store in downtown. Over on the south side of Basalt, we're going to see a new development called Stotts Mill, the old Stotts property, which now is home to some old farm machinery and has its own kind of nostalgia and history. That is going to offer a mixed-use residential development also with childcare facilities and parks, and that's going to be quite an addition. As you move out the highway to the Willett Center, there are three really significant projects underway. The heart of it will be the TACAW, the Arts Center at Willits, which is going to be a 240-seat cabaret theater with additional seating to get up to 400 patrons, and will be a spectacular sort of addition to the Mid-Valley cultural life. We also have the Stedman Center, which is going to be the state-of-the-art orthopedic center, perhaps for all of Colorado, with 4 major surgical suites, and some of the most specialized orthopedic surgeries in the Western United States will be occurring there. We also have a number of residential projects underway, and Willits is actually getting built out. So the future is very bright, but I want to underscore before we move on that I think we have a town council, we certainly have a planning commission and a Parks and Open Space Trails Committee that is very sensitive to the history of this town. And I think we all honor and respect the incredible hard work that took place in an era when Basalt was founded on mining and railroads, and that is all incredibly hard work. So we're very pleased at the town to have the opportunity to fulfill some of the original visions and dreams of our pioneers that came before us. So Barb, I don't know if you want to kind of conclude with some thoughts.
I think you've pretty much covered it. There's a lot happening in Basalt now. And I'm just pleased that we are not forgetting how we got here.
Well said.
Durocs and the Basalt Regional Heritage Society for collaborating with the library for this new collection, which includes many of their manuscripts and photographs. Now, the Durocs family has deep roots here in the Valley. Both sides, well, they trace their stories from the Aosta region of Italy. Amy Duroc French and her parents, Leroy and Janice, joined us earlier at the library to talk about their times and their families relocating to the area.
I'm Amy French, and I am excited to be here today talking with my parents. We all grew up here in the Roaring Brook Valley. I had no idea how lucky I was to grow up here, but pretty quickly after moving away, I realized what a special place I called home and the unique nature of our family's heritage here. I'm happy to take some time to reflect on our history here with my parents. Born in their homes in Woody Creek and in the Hooks area. Leroy is a retired Finnish carpenter and built fine cabinetry and furniture as a career. He's currently on the Crown Mountain Recreation Board and the Roaring Brook Fire and Rescue Board. He was a former elected official and spent 17 years as Basalt mayor and town councilman. And my mother, Janice Durocs, whose maiden name was Demos, was born in Glenwood and lived at Hooks Lane in the home I live in now. Her parents, Oscar, who was born in Hooks area, and Vivian in Oxford, Iowa. Janice is recently retired after 20 years as clerk of court for Eagle County and is the president of Basalt Regional Heritage Society. So, Mom, why don't you start? Take it away. All right, take it away. So I'd like to start with a little chat about Leroy and I. It's an interesting love story. I don't know if that's where we should start, but it's just been always fun to tell people. All of Leroy's 4 grandparents and my father's grandfather and mother, so it would be, and my father's mom and dad, knew each other in the small valleys of Aosta, Italy. They settled here in different years. My grandfather came in 1901, and his grandparents came a little later. But they both settled in the Basalt and Woody Creek Valley on ranches. Leroy's parents, Rini and Almeda, were married in 1941, and they both were also from those Aosta families. It's really interesting that my grandma, Marie, which would have been a Demos, was a midwife for Leroy's mom, Almeda's birth. They're in Hooks down in the old glacier home. So our parents, Oscar Vivian, Almeda and Rini, and the grandparents, we were all childhood friends. They were friends, we were friends, we all got along together. We didn't do a lot socially, but we would always run into each other at picnics and different things. Our land, as it turns out, is adjoining also. The Demos property is on the west side of Hooks Bridge, and the Durox property is on the east side of Hooks Bridge, which would be separated by the Roaring Fork Valley. I mean the Roaring Fork River, you're right. Leroy came to Basalt High School as a freshman, and I was 1 year younger. So throughout 4 years, we attended school together. Neither of us dated much, and at the end of Leroy's senior year, we did double date, and he went on to Western State to Gunnison, and I, the next year, graduated and went to business school in Denver, and later on was employed. So we met on occasion whenever we seemed to come home and whenever there was something going on. Our brother's graduations and different things. So the courtship began, and the shy, as I always say, the shy Catholic man married the neighbor Methodist girl at St. Stephen's Church in 1972. There was standing room only. It's a huge church, we thought, and I think everyone invited showed up. Well, because everyone either knew us or was related to us in this valley, everyone, the old-time Aostan families. We had a home-cooked dinner at the church hall, and we danced all night to polka music. It was provided by my bachelor uncle, Amy. That's Amy's name. So everyone was excited that the 2 Aosta Valley youngsters and the 2 classmates from Basalt High School were married. So today, here we are, almost 49 years later, a great marriage. We will tell you about our memories here in Basalt. We still live in the same home at the same spot on Willets Lane. We've raised 2 children, Amy and Darren. We're now watching 2 grandsons grow up, Harper and Bryce, and we have a little granddaughter who will join our family in April. Now, you talked a little bit about the family in Aosta. Why don't you talk a little bit more about how that immigration process went?
Well, my grandparents came from Aosta, Italy, and both sets of my mom's folks and my dad's folks also. The men came over before the women did. Actually, they weren't even married when the men came over. So they came over and they found that there was jobs and there was opportunities. They spent their time, early time, working in the mines in Leadville and Cripple Creek and Victor. And then they decided that it was time that they became married and a family, so they went back and married women that they knew in Aosta. And they came back to the United States. I think my grandmother Durox came by herself. Yeah, and my mom's folks, they came into the valley also, and they, my grandfather's father ended up buying a ranch at the bottom of Watson Divide, which is up Snowmass Creek, and that's where they lived there for a while, and then they were were sharecroppers. They moved from ranch to ranch. They would be like the hired men, and they were offered a place to live and work. So my grandfather and grandmother, Letty, never owned any real estate property because they, I guess the opportunity never arose, or they were happy with what they were doing. They had a big family. There was 3 boys and 3 girls. And so that's how that all got started. And my dad's parents lived in Leadville. First part of their married life, they had 2 daughters that were born, stillborn. And the doctors told my grandparents that should never deliver a live baby unless they came to a lower elevation because of the altitude in Leadville was 10,000 feet. So they decided to come to Aspen, which was 8,000 feet. So they bought a house on the east end of town. When they first got here, it's actually still there. It's a small little house between 2 condos. But they paid $55 for the house, and it also included a kitchen table and a bed. So that's how they got started in the valley, and then he progressed to buy ranch land. He worked in the mines for a little while until he got enough money to start buying farmland, because in Italy, where they came from, their occupation was farming, so they knew a lot about farming, and the elevation and climates were basically the same here as they were in Aosta where they left. So the first ranch they bought was now where the Aspen High School complex is. They own the base of Highlands and that ranch down there. They had cattle, sheep, and my grandfather tried all different kinds of crops. The next ranch they bought was on McLean Flats, which was about 5 miles west of Aspen. And there was over 200 acres there, and that's where I was born. In the meantime, he bought a ranch which is now the Red Mountain Ranch, which is now part of Red Mountain, and also he owned Willoughby Ranch, which is the lower part of Red Mountain. And in 1949, he decided he had an opportunity to buy some land down valley, so he bought 2 ranches here in west of Basalt. One of them is where the Basalt Industrial Park is, and the other one's about a half a mile away on the river side of Willits Lane. It's across from the Willits development. I was probably 9 years old. My grandfather decided it was time to sell the ranch we lived on in Clean Flats. Unbeknown to my father, we moved to we worked for the gentleman that bought it for a couple of years and moved to Grand Junction for a couple of years. We bought a 100-acre farm down west of Grand Junction. It was not a very productive piece of land. So then we had an opportunity to move back to Aspen in 1993 in the spring. So we took that opportunity and
93. 63.
63, sorry. So we worked on a ranch there, irrigated that summer, and unbeknown to us, the guys decided to sell it. So in the fall, we moved down to near where the medical center is now, built a house there, and that's when I started school in Salt. So, life basically was whatever was generated on the farm, and the brothers and the sisters, that was their entertainment. And that's about all the social life there was.
Well, that's a perfect segue. I think we could talk for hours about have kind of the immigration stories of all the different families and ranches, but I think that was a good way to start about what your social life was like and what it was like growing up here.
Sure, same thing. We didn't ever really live in Basalt since I lived near Hooks Bridge. We didn't come to Basalt real often. I remember Main Street is gravel. The sidewalk was only on one side of the street, the Van Darien side of the street, and it was wooden. It was a wooden sidewalk. Just like now, you drove down to the end and you turned around and made a U-turn and came back. I mean, that was Basalt. The Main Street of Basalt happens to be it's a highway. It used to be the railroad. The railroad it's now really a U.S. highway. It happens to be Main Street Basalt, but it's the highway to Frying Pan. And so, in the years past, it was the railroad, was Main Street. So I do remember going with my dad to Ben Darien's grocery store. And Ben Darien's grocery store is now Arian's. And I think the excitement, my brother Steve, who was 2 years younger than I am, leaving, just coming the 3 miles from our ranch into the grocery store was a big deal because we usually got a piece of candy. And that's what you went for, was the candy bar or the piece of candy. The toilet paper, probably, most everything we grew in the garden or we raised ourselves, so you didn't need much at the grocery store. Another thing I remember are the Saturday night dances that everybody's always talked about, and they still were occurring in the 50s and 60s. My dad was an odd fellow, and so he loved to dance, and that was their social life. And so every Saturday night on one side during the summer, on one side of the street or the other, the Legion Hall or the Oddfellows Hall would have a Saturday night dance. And everyone came. And that's where they charged admissions and made a little money. The ladies had dinner at midnight. They would have sandwiches, and that group of ladies made a little bit of money off the sandwiches. Everyone came, everyone in the valley, and especially single people, because that's where you met. As you will hear every story of anyone that's 90 years old and younger, they met at the dance. So in the 50s and 60s, the community was centered around church activities and school activities. The Methodist and the Catholic churches, those were the only two churches in the area. The Methodists would have a mother-daughter banquet in the spring. St. Pat's Day was for the Catholic Church. We used to have bazaars, different dinners, different things. And we bring all the farmers out into the valley, into the town to get together and visit.
One of the more daring things that we did, it's a small group of us decided that we wanted to thrill sleigh ride. So we decided we were going to sleigh ride in Missouri Heights Road. So we went to the top of the sleds, and this one guy had an old Jeep. So we loaded whatever sleds we could and drove the rest of them up to the top of the hill. Started at the top of the hill. This was at night because you could see the cars coming. There were cars, you could see the headlights. The first trip down the hill was pretty hard stopping.
You did it on their tummies too, right? Yeah. Tummy first, on your belly, head first.
Sleds with runners.
Guess what? My mom never let me out of the house.
We ended up coasting all the way to almost to the highway from.
Okay.
If you just let this thing go, but most of the time we stopped down the base of the hill and went back up. We used to do 2 or 3 runs. And, it was, as long as it was a small group, it was fine. And then everybody decided that they were going to have fun too. And this girl ran under a parked car and hurt herself really bad. So that was no more of that. They started sanding.
We're so grateful to Amy and Janice and Leroy for joining us for this introduction to the Basalt Heritage Collection, which we'll be housing here at the Basalt Regional Library. The stories of the Durox family and the stories of all the heritage families from town and from the Frying Pan and the Mid-Valley, Warrenburg Valley area are things that we want to include in this collection. Some of the things we'll be able to check out and some will be housed here as a resource for people to come in and look at the library. We hope to be able to have this collection open by the spring. And we also hope that the library will be open in the spring, and that you'll be able to come back in and check out all the things that have been going on here while we've been closed, and while you've been so patient and supportive of the library during this time. Janice, do you have anything else that you'd like to add?
Of course, you know Janice. I want to thank her for her organization and getting this started. As the president of the South Regional Heritage Society, you've all seen me for years and years trying to get chats together, trying to get the history recorded. The Albany Barn was our excitement. We've turning it into a museum. Of course, we've had to close it all down. And we want to remind everyone in the Valley, anyone hearing this, that if you have any history, any books, any photos, anything, we can scan photos, give them back to you. We would love any donations. We will either put them here in the library in this collection, or we can put them in the museum. We want the history. We think we've had time now to think about this and try to give this as a wonderful addition to the library. Anyone that wants to come and be interviewed, Kathy would love it. Anything you want to bring it to the door of the library. Knock, they'll take it. We're eager. I just have one more little thing to say. Is, as everyone knows, Janice, she has one more thing to say. In this valley, at the turn of the 19th century, so many couples came from Europe with few coins of the dream of freedom. With the hard work, good investments, and opportunities for land, they made a family in the USA. So many grandparents, moms, dads, who have worked hard with their hands and their land for the satisfaction of seeing their children have a college education, a successful business, home, great occupation. We have a hope for a better life, or that some of the opportunities we had, we now hope for the same for our children in the years ahead. I think history is so important that we understand the roots of our family, how we all tie together, how everyone's story is kind of the same. We all immigrated from somewhere. And I think it's real important that we get this history preserved now in 2021. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. See you soon.
Well, as Janice mentioned, the library and the Heritage Society will be working together not only to collect materials, but to record the oral histories of our community. Heritage Council member Bill Hegberg has gleaned archives, newspapers, and books for photographs of our valley from the early days. Now, many of the photos included in this presentation are courtesy of Bill's meticulous archival record. Here's another glimpse of life with the Elmont clan.
Grandfather, was he an Elmont also?
My grandfather was an Elmont. The only way he got in the U.S. was during the Civil War. He jumped ship in New York Harbor and swam to Ellis Island. And they said, "You can't come in, you're a WAP." He didn't know what a WAP was, and the lady explained, without papers. So they said, "If you'll fight for the North in the Civil War, we'll let you stay." So in 1863, he joined the Union Army, served faithfully, was wounded a couple of times. So so they were forced to move to Basalt because they knew that was my mother's and Herbert's mother's hometown. And Maud's husband, Herbert Elmont, grazed cattle on the main streets of Basalt on the grassy strips because we didn't have paved streets. And that's how he made his living. And later, years later, Maud became the postmaster when Herbert died. They had some famous children. Their son was Albert Elmont, who lives in Englewood, Colorado, and has been a school teacher all his life. And their three daughters all married into those Italian families from Aosta. Ruth and Alice married two Wagner brothers, And the Wagners at one time owned about 80% of all of Woody Creek. Some other Italians, Arlene's and others, owned other chunks. And then their daughter Maudie, named after her mother Maud, married Stanley Uzel, which was one of the most prominent families in the whole valley, that owned a ranch at Holland Hills. Then the other family was my uncle Albert Nelson. When Grandma's Jakeman died from gunshot wounds, she spent a few years alone and moved up to Norrie in an old wooden house that was famous there until the 1970s when the government tore it down. It belonged to some teacher lady from Glenwood at the end. And she met a logger. Norrie was producing more timbers than any place in all of Colorado and shipping them out by millions of board feet on the Midland, east and west, all over the country. So his name was Swan Nelson. He migrated here from Sweden to Canada. When he heard of a logging job in Norrie, he moved there, met Grandma, and they had 4 boys in that old sod roof log house. So there were 3 Jakemans from my mother's group, 4 Nelsons from her second husband, and 2 boarders, plus Lydia Newkirk, later Newkirk, Lydia Nelson, and her husband Swan, all living in that one little tiny house.
Just amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's a great look at your family, Earl. Thank you.
I took Aunt Maud up there in the 1980s, and she was astonished. She said, "Where did all those trees come from?" I said, "They grew." She said, "When I was here from the lumber business, the hills were bare."
Yeah, I've seen several of your maps, including the one at Peach Blow that you put together. That was a great map.
I was afraid if I didn't make a rough one, at least, no one would ever remember what it was like there. And the stone at Peach Blow went all over the world also. It went to Colorado Springs, including their railroad building there. It's in Glenwood in the pool building, the Glenwood Springs Hot Springs Pool building. It's the foundation of the Hotel Colorado, and it's all over Aspen, including one old building that used to be called the Ute Cafe and is probably something else right now. But that stone went out there by the hundreds of tons from Peach Blow, all east and west across the world.
Earl, let me shift a little bit to your childhood. In those early years when you were growing up in Basalt, what were the most fun things for a young man to do in Basalt?
We made our own fun. First of all, the snow back in the 30s and 40s was always 6 feet deep. I don't remember a winter when it was less than 6 feet deep. And that continued long enough that that's why you had such terrible floods in the 1950s. I'm sure you've read, I used to think the flood was 52, but I read someone say it was 55 or 56. And that makes more sense because I was a teenager and the road was clear out at Elk Run. The bridges were mostly out, and everybody was worried that Mita Cerise and his son Reno, who should still be alive, living southwest of Basalt, would lose their cattle. So everyone was wading the river to go over there and help them. And I waded the river chest deep, which was a very foolish thing. And by the time I got there to help, the help wasn't needed anymore. But because of all the snow, we did a lot of sledding. We had famous sleds called flexible flyers. They were all the rage because with your feet, they turned so easily. Then one year, an old man named Gus Hutz, H-U-T-Z, had a little store and gas station between the Darien grocery store, which later became the post office, and Shirley Darien lived upstairs in it until she died a few years ago. And the Two Rivers Cafe, there was a little building. I think he did repair work like machinery and stuff, and knife sharpening and blade sharpening. And he said to my brother Clifford, "Come back behind the store through the alley." And he opened a great big old garage or shed and pulled out a big orange toboggan. Most of us had never seen a toboggan, and it would hold 3 or 4 little kids and 3 big people. And you steered it with a rope hooked to the front end, but mostly you steered it with your feet on the front skis. So that was a big treat. Now the hill was, Basalt has houses built up on top of it right now that we didn't have up there then. We called it the Coasting Hill, and it was by the old Oscar Blank place, a white house that Bob Terrell, the game warden, bought later for his son Larry and his wife Betty. And we'd cross a little creek and go up the top of that hill, and there were 2 dangerous curves. If you weren't careful on the first curve, you dropped 4 feet into a big pond of watercress. Down at the bottom of the hill, if you weren't careful, you ran through a barbed wire fence. We kept warm by a pot-bellied stove set up halfway up the hill, and we fired it with sagebrush. Boy, it could really get hot. But the trouble was, when you went home, you stunk to high heaven, and your mothers always complained.
Well, on behalf of the Basalt Regional Library and the Heritage Collection, we'd like to thank you all for joining us tonight. Now, the library is here for the community during these crazy times. Do not hesitate to check it out, basaltlibrary.org, basaltlibrary.org. But thank you for your time tonight, and have a great night.